They came for me at sunset, right when the sky burned orange over the lake, and the cicadas screamed like they knew something I didn't. I was standing barefoot on the dock, gutting the day's catch, when 3 patrol cars tore down the gravel road like they were chasing a fugitive. Dust rose behind them like a warning. The sirens didn't wail, but the urgency in their approach told me this wasn't a courtesy visit. I didn't move. Not because I'm brave, just old enough to know when fear is wasted breath. I laid the fish down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned as the doors swung open. Karen stepped out first, high-heeled sandals clicking against the uneven dirt, like she was walking a courtroom floor. Blonde hair sprayed into defiance, clipboard tight in her arms, and a smile that could slice rope. He's armed," she said to the deputies without even looking at me. "Threatened me. He has a knife." The deputies looked at my fillet blade still lying on the cutting board. One of them, younger, hand on his holster, took a cautious step forward. "Sir, step away from the weapon." "It's a fish knife," I said. "You see the fish?" Karen interrupted. "He's squatting here. This is Homeowner Association land. I've told him 3 times. He's refused to leave. Now he's threatening residents." That was when I felt it. The shift, like the lake inhaled. The officers stiffened. One reached for his radio. Another glanced at the camera mounted on his chest. "Procedure. Cover your tail. Record the old man going crazy." "Turn around, sir. Hands where I can see them." You serious?" "Now." So, I did. I gave them my wrists. The cold bite of metal came next. My boots scraped the dock as they marched me toward the cruiser. I looked over my shoulder. Karen stood tall, arms folded, victorious. "I told you," she said, almost sweet. "You people think the rules don't apply." Funny thing was, I wasn't even mad. Not yet. Just confused. Because I'd built that cabin with my own hands in 1993. With lumber I milled myself. Paid taxes on that land for 3 decades. Buried my dog there. My wife's ashes scattered under the big cypress by the dock. But now I was in the back of a cruiser, watching the lake get smaller through smudged glass. At the station, they processed me like I was some derelict. No real charges, no Mirandizing. Just questions, paperwork, suspicion. The young deputy, Miller, I think, kept glancing at the file in front of him like it didn't make sense. "You got any ID?" Wallet's in the cabin. Or was, unless she stole that too." He nodded, scribbled something, then left the room. 10 minutes passed, then 20. When he came back, he had a folder. Not thick, not thin, just ominous. According to county records," he said, "this property was transferred 2 years ago to the Lakeshore Homeowner Association. Your name's not on anything. There's no deed under you." My mouth went dry. That's impossible. Not if you never registered properly. Or if someone filed a quiet title claim and it went uncontested. He said it like a possibility, not an accusation. But it hit like a boot to the chest. I'd heard of quiet title claims, legal trickery, technicalities. Usually requires posting notices, publishing in newspapers no one reads. If you're not watching every corner of bureaucracy, someone can slip right in and take what's yours. I'd been up in the mountains when my brother died. 6 weeks gone. No phone, no letters, no idea. And that's when they did it. Karen didn't just want the land. She took it. They let me go around midnight. No charges filed. Just a warning. Don't return. Trespassing would be prosecuted. I walked the 10 miles back through the woods, using the stars and old instincts. Slept 3 hours under an elm and kept walking. When I got back, the dock was gone. Hauled off. The windows shattered. And on the oak tree out front, a red sign nailed crooked. Private property, no trespassing. Managed by Lakeshore HOA. I stood there, blood boiling, fists clenched, hearing my wife's voice in the wind off the lake. For a moment I saw her standing there, barefoot and laughing, paintbrush in one hand, coffee in the other. That cabin was ours. They'd made a mistake, a very bad one, because I wasn't just some squatter with a story. I owned more than a cabin. I owned the damn county. They just didn't know it yet. The sun hadn't even cleared the pines when I started the walk into town. Gravel crunched under my boots. Every step a drumbeat in my chest. There was no storm on the radar, but I could feel it in my knees. Something about injustice wakes up old bones. The town looked the same on the surface. Red brick storefronts, faded awnings, American flags limp in the still morning air. But under that postcard, calm was a rot I hadn't smelled before. I passed Sally's Cafe. No wave. Just stares through the blinds. I used to eat there every Thursday. Chicken fried steak, extra gravy. Now I was a ghost with dirty boots. At the courthouse annex, the clerk, a thin man with an overbite and a nervous smile, barely met my eye. "You looking for deed records?" he asked without me saying a word. I nodded. He pulled out a thin folder. "You were the listed owner on parcel 407A. But in April 2023, the title was transferred to the Lakeshore Homeowner Association. No challenge was filed, so the quiet title, action cleared." "Challenge?" He shifted uncomfortably. "They published notice. Legally, that's all they have to do." I looked at the dates. The publication ran in a local rag that folded 6 months later. They knew I wasn't around. They planned it. "Do you who filed it?" He glanced over his shoulder like he might get in trouble. "It was submitted through a paralegal firm. But the client listed was Karen Whitmore. Of course. Karen, the queen of manicured tyranny." I left the annex with my fists clenched so tight my nails drew blood. I needed to think. I needed proof. But more than that, I needed one thing I hadn't had in a long time. An ally. So I headed north. Out past the gas station and down a dirt road that hadn't seen a county truck in years. The sign still hung crooked on a bent pole. Beltran Survey and Mapping. Est. 1971. Earl Beltran was retired, half-blind, and mostly deaf. But 30 years ago, he mapped every inch of my land when I subdivided it from the old timber claim. I found him on his porch, a jug of iced tea in one hand and an oxygen tube in his nose. "Damn, son," he wheezed, squinting. "You look like a man who's been chewed up." "Worse," I said. "I got eaten whole. I laid out what happened. He listened, silent except for the hiss of his tank. Then he stood, slower than I remembered, and disappeared into the back of the house. 10 minutes later, he came back with a rolled map and a plastic sleeve of documents yellowed by time. These are your surveys, filed with the county in '93. There's even a deed overlay with mineral rights notations. He tapped a shaky finger on one corner. But here's what they don't know. He pointed to a faded stamp, Perpetual Access Easement. All parcels bound under Timberline County Agreement 227. That agreement predates the HOA by 15 years, and it grants you full access to the lakefront. No expiration unless nullified by mutual consent, which you sure as hell didn't give. That was the crack, the tiny fracture in their whole scheme. I had something they missed, something old, something binding, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know what else they were hiding. So I drove east, toward the one place where records don't disappear. The county archive, a cold, fluorescent-lit tomb buried beneath the library. They keep microfiche there, originals. The kind of stuff lawyers forget exists. I spent 5 hours there. My eyes burned. My fingers smelled of dust and vinegar. But I found it. A contract signed in 1993 between Timberline County and myself, leasing out 200 feet of Lakeshore Road for public utility access. Infrastructure that still ran power to half the development, which meant if I reclaimed that right of way, I could shut down power to half the homes Karen now presided over like a queen. But I wasn't ready to play that card. Not yet. Because sometimes you need to let the enemy feel safe before the trap closes. That night, I hiked back to the remains of the cabin. What was left of it? Karen had been busy. The dock was gone, torn out like a rotten tooth. My fishing gear? Dumped. The cypress tree? Painted with orange marks, like a target. But I didn't touch anything. I didn't curse. I sat by the tree, lit a fire with deadfall, and poured a little bourbon into the dirt where my wife's ashes lay. Won't let them take this, darlin', I whispered. And then from the shadows, I heard footsteps. Not animal, not wind, boots. Someone was watching, and they weren't alone. I didn't reach for the flashlight. Didn't call out. Years ago, in a different life, I'd learned that whoever breaks the silence first usually loses the upper hand. So I sat still, hand on my belt, where the old folding knife rested, and let the dark breathe. 2 sets of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunch of twigs, the soft hiss of damp grass under boots. One moved wide, circling. The other approached straight on. Then a voice, low and unfamiliar. "Evenin'." I didn't answer. "You shouldn't be out here. This is HOA jurisdiction now." I stood, slow and steady. "That so?" Out stepped a man in a black windbreaker. No badge, no logo. Late 30s, built like he still hit the gym for more than vanity. Eyes like river rock, dull and gray. Behind him, the second figure emerged. Lean, taller, face half in shadow. Both had the quiet alertness of men used to being feared. I don't believe we've met," I said, voice flat. No need to get friendly. You've been told to leave, last warning." You boys with the sheriff?" We work with the HOA's security division. Contracted, private sector, which meant they were muscle. Paid enforcers, not law. Not by any real definition. You're trespassing, I said. This land's disputed. Until that's settled, I've got every right to be here. The taller one smirked. Ain't how we heard it. The short one took a step forward. Look, old man, this ain't personal. But if you keep showing up, someone's gonna get hurt. I didn't move, just stared him down. The fire popped behind me, throwing his face into red relief. For a second, he flinched. Then he turned. Let's go. He'll get the message. They disappeared into the trees. No threats, no names, just the soft menace of hired ghosts. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat by the embers, listening to the woods breathe. By dawn, I was already moving. There was a man I needed to find. Sheriff Holt. Retired, but still carried weight around these parts. He'd been my neighbor once, back when men shook hands to settle things. He lived out past the quarry now, off a road too rutted for most cars. His house looked like it had been built by grudges and duct tape, but the lights were on. He opened the door in a flannel shirt and boxer shorts. Eyes bloodshot. Jesus, Roy, you look like hell. Feel worse, I said. Need 5 minutes. He waved me in, poured coffee like it was currency. I laid it out. Karen's play, the quiet title, The Muscle in the Woods. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he nodded once, then sighed. You're not gonna like what I tell you. Try me. Karen's married to the new county assessor. Guy's a snake. Smart, but slippery. She's got half the board in her pocket. They don't care about law. They care about leverage. And they think you're just some old vet squatting on premium shoreline. They think wrong. He smiled. You got anything in writing? I've got surveys, easements, contracts from '93. Check. That's a start. But they'll bury you in red tape unless you hit 'em where it hurts. And where's that? He tapped his temple. Their illusion. They only win if people believe they're in control. Break that, you unravel the whole rope. He gave me a name, Clarence Rowe, former HOA treasurer, fired 6 months ago for misconduct. Holt said the man knew where the skeletons were buried. Rowe worked at a pawn shop now, downtown. I found him chain-smoking behind a stack of busted microwaves. At first he laughed in my face. You want me to cross Karen? For what? Nostalgia? Because she took something that was mine, and odds are she used you to do it. That wiped the smirk off. She may have leaned on me to process some paperwork faster. Maybe fudged a few timestamps. And if someone pulled those files? His eyes darted. They won't. She made sure of that. But you still have the original backups, don't you? He hesitated, then nodded. I don't want to go to war, I said. But if I do, I want to know who's standing where. He looked at me long, then stubbed out his cigarette and said, Meet me tonight, east end of the rail yard. I'll bring what I've got. I left feeling like I was walking across thin ice with dynamite in my coat. Back at the lake, the wind had picked up. Clouds gathered. The air had that electric tension, the kind that makes animals hide early. And there, parked near the ruins of my dock, was a white SUV. Windows tinted, engine running. They were back. But this time, I wasn't going to sit by the fire and wait. The SUV idled like a threat, its engine humming low and steady. A predator's growl in neutral. I didn't bother approaching. Instead, I walked around back, into the tree line, slipping between shadows until I had a clear view of the driver's side. 2 men. Same pair from before. They weren't talking, just watching. One had binoculars. The other rested his arm casually near the center console, where I'd bet a weapon sat waiting. They weren't here to intimidate me anymore. They were here to establish ownership by presence. That was a mistake. I doubled back and made my way to the old ranger trail, half overgrown and mostly forgotten. Followed it down past the cove where the beavers used to dam up in spring. At the base of the trail sat a generator station, mine, installed in '97 under a lease agreement with the county. Power lines still ran from it, snaking up to the ridge where half the HOA's fancy homes now sparkled like parasites. I checked the lock. Still intact. I had the key. But not yet. This wasn't the time to start a war. Not until I had the files from Clarence, so I waited. At dusk, I took the long road into town. Hood up, cap low, blending in like old bark on a fence. The rail yard hadn't changed much, just more rust, fewer trains. Clarence was already there, pacing near an abandoned caboose. "You alone?" he asked, voice tight. I nodded. "You?" He laughed, bitter. "Ain't nobody lining up to help me these days." He handed me a manila envelope. Thick, worn. Inside, photocopies, email printouts, notes. Dates circled in red ink. Timestamp edits. Some contracts missing original signatures. This enough? More than enough. And just don't tell anyone where you got it. I never met you. We parted without a handshake. Back in the truck, I flipped through the pages under the dome light. It was all there. Karen's petition to the county to expedite the title transfer. The public notice she buried in a paper with a circulation under 100. The independent assessor who turned out to be her cousin from out of state. And the kicker. She'd filed the notice using an outdated parcel number, one that hadn't matched my property in over 10 years. It shouldn't have passed review, but it did, because the right eyes were paid to look away. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in my truck, engine off, lights out, thinking. By morning, I had a plan. First stop was Earl Beltran's place. He wasn't surprised to see me. "Thought you'd be back," he said. "That fire still burnin'?" "Hotter than ever." I showed him the envelope. He whistled through his teeth. "She's gonna hang herself with this if you let her." I don't want her to hang. I want her to move." He nodded slowly. "That's meaner." We spent 3 hours drafting a map overlay that proved the HOA's common areas. Beachfront, parking lot, and picnic grounds. We're all sitting on sections that reverted to my ownership once the lease expired, which it had 2 years ago, without renewal. I left with blueprints, legal coordinates, and a small fireproof box full of the original filings. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I could play older. Then I made one more stop. An old military buddy named Jess Carmichael, now a freelance contractor with a reputation for solving non-traditional infrastructure problems. He met me outside the hardware store, sunglasses hiding a face that had seen more deserts than daylight. "You want it quiet or theatrical?" he asked. "Quiet for now, but ready for fireworks." He grinned. "You always did have flair." We drove up to the generator. I unlocked the gate, showed him the schematics, told him where the lines fed, told him what I wanted. Timer?" he asked. "Manual. I want to flip the switch myself." Jess nodded. "This'll take a few days." You got cover? Not yet, but I'm working on it. That night, I returned to the cabin site. No SUV, no goons, just silence. But something felt wrong. Then I saw it. The cypress tree. Slashed. Deep gouges in the bark. Fresh. Crude. Like someone took a hatchet to it in anger. That tree was sacred. Not in the church sense. In the personal one. The roots held my wife's ashes. The soil under it was the only part of this cursed world that still felt like home. And now it bled. I sank to my knees. Just for a minute. Let it hit me. Not rage, not yet. Grief. And under that, a cold clarity. They didn't just want the land. They wanted me erased. Fine. Let them try. The next morning, the lake looked different. Still. Yes. But the kind of stillness you see before a thunderstorm tears open the sky. I stood at the edge, coffee in hand, staring across the water like it owed me an answer. It didn't give one. I spent the day laying groundwork. Called in a favor with a guy I hadn't spoken to since the flood of '08. Pete McGuire runs a backhoe and doesn't ask questions. Told him I needed some terrain adjustment around the northern access trail. How deep? He asked. Enough to make a statement. Then I stopped by the feed store, where I used to get salt blocks and ammo back before things got complicated. Old man Reggie still ran the register. Still smelled like axle grease and tobacco. He squinted at me, like trying to decide whether I was a memory or a ghost. You're stirring the pot again, Roy? They tipped it over first. He didn't ask more. Just rang up the chain, the solar lights, and the bags of lime. Whatever you're cooking, don't burn the whole county down. No promises. By evening, the lakefront shimmered in gold light, as if the land was trying to remember peace. I stood near the generator with Jess, going over final checks. You sure about the cutoff line? He asked. Sorry. If the HOA wants their fake paradise, they can live without lights for a night or two. He gave a low whistle. You flip this, you won't be able to walk it back. I'm not trying to. We set the manual switch beneath a camo cover. Jess gave me a burner phone. When you're ready, just press 3. It'll prime the relay. Then pull this lever. Power cuts clean. Takes about 8 seconds. I nodded. Make it loud. That night, I slept. Not deep, not well, but enough. Until a rock smashed through the truck window around 2 a.m. I rolled out with the shotgun before the glass stopped moving. No target. Just a fleeing silhouette and taillights bouncing down the dirt road, on the hood in red spray paint. Get out or stay buried. Ciao San San no. They'd finally dropped the mask. In the morning, I buried the threat in lime and brush. Cleaned the glass. Replaced the window with a tarp and duct tape. Drove to town like nothing happened. But inside, something had shifted. Fear had calcified into something colder. Resolve. At the diner, Sally didn't serve me. Just walked past like I was air. But someone else slid into the booth across from me. Young, late 20s. Hair too neat for someone local. Name tag read Carson. You're Roy, right? I didn't answer. I'm with the Lakeshore Homeowner Association's planning committee. Thought we could chat. Not interested. He smiled, like he rehearsed it. You've made quite the impression. Karen wants to offer a settlement. I laughed once. Sharp. I don't settle with thieves. His smile didn't budge. You have certain records. Let's not pretend. But this can go one of two ways. You sign over usage rights and we grant you a lifetime lease. No more harassment. Or things keep escalating. Lifetime lease? Tax-free. Papered. Quiet. I leaned in. Why would I lease land I already own? His smile thinned. Because we're not afraid to play dirty. And you're outnumbered. I stood. Then you better bring more than numbers. He left a card on the table. Think it over. I burned it in a coffee cup out back. The rest of the day passed in silence. No trucks, no goons, just wind. I took it for what it was. The calm before a breaking point. That night, I sat by the cypress again. Looked at the scar in the bark, now sealed with resin and effort. My wife used to say the land would talk to you if you listened long enough. It was talking now, saying, "Finish this." I picked up the burner phone, pressed 3, waited 8 seconds, then pulled the lever. Across the lake, a dozen lights went out, then another dozen. Whole hillside blinked dark. Silence rolled in, and somewhere, I imagined Karen fumbling for her phone, screaming into the night. Let her scream. I just reclaimed my voice. The fallout came fast. By sunrise, the HOA's emergency hotline was jammed. Karen's little kingdom blinked awake to no power, no water pumps, no internet. Luxury cabins turned into dark boxes, with dead fridges and angry residents demanding answers. I watched from a distance, tucked beneath a pine ridge with binoculars and a thermos of bitter coffee. It wasn't pride I felt. Not exactly. Just the kind of satisfaction a man gets when the world remembers he exists. Karen arrived within the hour. Hair frazzled, lips tight. She barked into her phone like a general under siege. Her SUV skidded to a stop at the picnic grounds, where 24 homeowners had gathered, most of them in pajamas and fury. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the panic bloom across her face when someone pointed at the transformer station, and then down toward the generator trail. They were putting it together. Karen sent out a crew. 4 men in HOA polos and cheap boots, stomping toward my lease gate like they owned it. But the sign I'd installed overnight made them stop cold. Private easement, access revoked, trespassers will be photographed, documented, and prosecuted under Title IX. Jess had done more than install a switch. He rigged motion cams, solar floodlights, even a decoy siren that tripped when the gate was touched. The moment they laid a hand on the latch, the whole woods lit up, and a high-pitched whine sliced the morning air. They ran. I chuckled, but I knew this wouldn't end with shouting and light shows. That afternoon, I drove to the county archives again. Not for documents, but for silence. A place to think, to breathe, to plan the next move. In the basement stacks, I found something unexpected. A photo. Dated 1994. A ribbon cutting for the original utility road. My road. There I was, shovel in hand, smiling like a fool next to a much younger county commissioner. And beside us, Karen, younger, sharper, already in heels. I flipped the photo over. A name scribbled in faded ink. Karen Whitmore, intern, assessor's office. She'd been sniffing around the system for 30 years, climbing, manipulating, taking. I kept the photo. Not for leverage, for clarity. I needed to remember who I was up against. That evening, I sat at the lake's edge again. listening to bullfrogs croak over the low hum of anger across the water. Then I heard it. The drone. Low, steady buzz. Too smooth for a hobby toy. Thermal grade. HOA issued. I didn't duck. Let it see me. Let Karen know I wasn't hiding. But I made sure it saw something else too. Behind me, the old easement map, tacked to a board. Large letters painted across it in red. Expired. Return to owner. It hovered, then flew off. Next morning, a letter arrived. Not through the post. Hand-delivered. No return address. Just a folded piece of stationery tucked under a rock near my fire pit. Inside, a single typed line. And you don't want to escalate this. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. By noon, Jess called. They're probing the lines, probably trying to reroute. I can disable the grid permanently if you want. No, let them chase their tails a little longer. But I had something else in mind. I drove to the other side of the lake, to a lot Karen rarely visited. An old storage barn that once held maintenance equipment. Quiet, unassuming. Except today, it was crawling with activity. Men in uniforms with no insignia, loading boxes into unmarked vans. A tall man shouted orders, clipboard in hand. Not HOA, something else. Corporate. Maybe private logistics. I snapped photos, license plates, logos on crates. The name Trident Resourcing, LLC, repeated in faded stencils. Back at home, I dug. Trident had ties to Karen's husband, procurement contracts, shell leases, and most importantly, a paper trail that suggested HOA funds were being diverted for external asset storage. They weren't just stealing land. They were laundering it. The picture was bigger now, dirtier, and far more dangerous. That night, I lit a fire. Not for warmth, for signal. It burned high and red, casting shadows that danced across the cypress bark like ghosts. Let them see it. Let them wonder if I'd finally gone mad. Because the next move wasn't sabotage. It was exposure. And I'd just uncovered their nerve. 3 days passed, and the silence became an answer in itself. No drones, no SUVs, no letters under rocks. Just an eerie absence, like the calm inside a vacuum. But I knew better than to trust it. When snakes go quiet, it's not because they've slithered off, it's because they're coiling. Jess kept me posted. The HOA hadn't restored full power. Their attempt to reroute the grid backfired. Fried 3 transformers and left half the lakefront in a rolling blackout. Karen was hemorrhaging goodwill. Residents had started whispering. Rumors swirled. Sabotage, mismanagement, even accusations of embezzlement. I didn't have to lift a finger, but I wasn't done. I spent the next morning organizing Clarence's files, building a trail, lease agreements, shell companies, that photo from the archives. All mapped out across my cabin wall like a battlefield plan. Red strings, pins, old school paranoia with new school stakes. Anna and, right in the center, Karen's face. Cut from a newspaper article, laminated under Scotch tape. Headline: Whitmore named HOA Executive of the Year. I underlined it in black ink. Twice. That night, I took the boat across the lake under cover of fog. No lights. Just instinct and memory. The storage barn was quiet, locked tight. but the rear ventilation slats were old and wide. I slipped a GoPro inside on a rigged broomstick. Next morning, I reviewed the footage. Rows of boxes. Not maintenance gear. Not HOA documents. Cases marked sensitive equipment. One partially open. Solar surveillance drones. Military surplus. Another marked property of Timberline County in faded blue paint. Karen wasn't just laundering money, she was repurposing county assets through HOA shell fronts, and that changed everything. Because now she wasn't just a local tyrant, she was committing fraud across jurisdiction lines. Possibly federal. I sent the footage to someone I trusted. An old contact from my military days named Benji. He worked logistics now, but his real value was in who owed him favors. I didn't ask for miracles, just movement. Later that evening, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I was already by the fire pit, shotgun within reach, when the truck stopped short and the door slammed. But it wasn't Karen. It was Reggie, from the feed store. He walked up slow, hands visible. In one of them, an envelope. "I didn't see you coming," I said. He shrugged. Didn't want to announce it. Figured I'd get stopped. By who?" He handed me the envelope. "That's the thing. Karen's got a new team. Not HOA. Not even county. Folks in suits, sunglasses, been asking about you. Real quiet like." I opened the envelope. Inside, grainy photos. Me at the lake, me at the barn. Even one of me meeting Clarence at the rail yard. I looked up. "Where'd you get these?" They left them on my porch. No note, just left them. So they knew I was watching. And now, they were watching me. I thanked Reggie. Sent him off with a warning. Don't talk to anyone in a suit, no matter how polite they are. He nodded. I ain't stupid. After he left, I went inside, took down the red string map, folded it carefully into a fireproof bag, and buried it under the floorboards. Time for a different strategy. They wanted a silent war? Fine. Let's make noise. I drove into town the next day. Not to hide, to be seen. I visited every public office I had a name in. Post office, county records, even the barber shop. Just long enough to leave a shadow, because if they wanted to know where I was, I'd give them too much to track. Meanwhile, Benji called. I ran the name Trident. You were right. It's a procurement front, defense adjacent. They've been funneling decommissioned gear through HOA entities across 3 counties. You're sitting on a live wire, Roy. What can I do with it? Nothing, unless you make someone flinch. And how do I do that? He paused. You show up somewhere they never thought you'd dare. And just like that, I had my next move. I packed my truck, took the box of evidence, and drove straight to the Timberline Annual Planning Commission meeting. A place where Karen was scheduled to present a regional cooperation strategy. As I walked through the doors, heads turned. Some looked away. Others stared like I was a ghost. Karen's face froze mid-sentence. I didn't smile, didn't speak, just sat in the front row, box on my lap, eyes locked on hers. Let her wonder what I'd brought. Let her sweat, because the next word out of her mouth was going to cost her everything. Karen stumbled through her presentation like a drunk on roller skates. Her voice, usually syrupy with false authority, cracked under the weight of my stare. She mumbled about community partnerships and enhancing infrastructure. But the audience wasn't listening. They were watching me. I didn't blink, didn't move. Just let the box sit in my lap like a bomb with no timer. The more she avoided looking at it, the louder it got in that room. After 15 minutes of stammering and meaningless jargon, she wrapped up, face flushed, blouse damp with nerves. She tried to leave quickly, but I stood before she could slip out. Madam Chair, I said, voice loud, deliberate. One question. She froze. The room did too. I walked slowly to the center aisle, held up a document from the box. The original easement agreement. Dated, signed, notarized. Can you explain how this expired lease, never renewed, never renegotiated, allowed your homeowner association to build picnic grounds, private docks, and a gated parking lot on my land? A few murmurs in the crowd. One man turned to whisper to another. A woman from the commission leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Karen swallowed. This isn't the venue for... No, it isn't. But I wasn't invited to the right venue, was I? Funny how the people whose land gets taken never seem to get a seat at the table. She tried to step forward. I lifted the second document. A photo, printed large, of the military-grade surveillance drone packed in a Trident resourcing crate. Costume. Want to explain how this made it into an HOA storage facility? And why your husband's name is on the procurement ledger. The murmurs became gasps. Roy, she said, warning in her voice. You don't understand what you're doing. Oh, I do, I said, lowering the papers. I'm waking people up. I turned to the crowd. You've been sold a lie. This whole community is built on fraudulent land grabs, sweetheart deals, and intimidation. And I've got a box of evidence that proves it. Silence. Then, is that true? Someone asked from the back. Karen turned, flustered. He's not credible. He was arrested. Archie, for trespassing on my own property, I snapped. Thanks to paperwork, your office buried. I didn't stay. Just walked out, box under arm, slow and calm. Because sometimes you don't need to win the room. You just need to rattle the walls. The fallout didn't wait long. Within hours, my phone buzzed. Benji again. You made the right people nervous. I just got word. Trident's shutting down that facility. And someone in the assessor's office filed a resignation. I didn't ask who. I already knew. But this wasn't over. That night, I returned to the lake. Karen's SUV was parked crooked by the trail, door half open. She stood near the cypress tree, arms crossed, alone. No clipboard, no security, just her. I didn't speak first. I thought you'd blackmail me, she said, not turning. Wouldn't work. People like you don't feel shame, just fear. She looked down. You could have gone to the press, or the sheriff. Why the commission? Because they still care about appearances. And you? You hate losing control in public. She nodded slowly. You've made a mess, Roy. For everyone. No, Karen, you did. I just turned the lights on. She finally faced me. There was no rage now, no smirk, just something close to tiredness. What do you want? 3 things, I said. First, you sign a full relinquishment of all rights and claims to the 407A parcel. Second, you issue a public statement acknowledging improper acquisition. And third, you leave. For good. And if I don't? I took a step closer. Then I stopped playing fair. And believe me, Karen, you wouldn't survive the other version of me. Silence. Then she nodded. You'll get your papers in the morning. I waited until she drove off before I exhaled. Not victory, not relief, just the kind of breath a man takes after surviving a fire, because I knew something she didn't. That box? It wasn't the only one I had. The real files, the ones that mattered, were already copied and mailed to 3 people I trusted more than myself, just in case she got clever. Because you don't win against people like her by playing one move ahead. You win by playing every move at once. And I was finally holding the whole board. The papers arrived at dawn. Hand-delivered, notarized, signed in Karen's tight, anxious script. 3 pages of surrender, masquerading as legal formality. Her letterhead still bore the HOA logo, but the ink felt thinner now, like a crown dipped in water. I read every line twice. Then, once more, for the sake of closure. The land was mine again, officially, indisputably, without clause or asterisks. 417A, shoreline to treeline. My dock, my soil, my tree. But it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a funeral. I stood under the cypress just after sunrise. The wind came cold off the lake, heavy with morning fog. The scar on the bark still held the resin, a dark line across its side like a war wound that refused to fade. I ran my hand across it. Still here, I whispered. We made it. No answer, of course. Just the rustle of leaves and the occasional groan of water lapping against rocks. But I felt her, as I always did. My wife. In the wind. In the earth. In the fire that hadn't gone out, even when everything else tried to drown it. That afternoon, Jess came by for one last check. We shared a beer by the trail. You're not smiling, he said. Hotshot too tired for grins. You won, Roy. Maybe. But this wasn't the kind of fight I ever wanted to win. He nodded. That's how you know you're still human. Reggie stopped by later with a bag of rock salt and a jug of fuel for the lanterns. Said nothing. Just left them by the porch and gave me a look that said more than words could carry. Respect? Maybe even gratitude. Or maybe just relief that the storm had passed. The days turned quiet after that. Karen's name vanished from local meetings. Her husband filed a leave of absence from the assessor's office. Trident's facility was boarded up, their equipment carted away in the dead of night. No charges. No press. Just a quiet retreat into the shadows they came from. Some battles end with fanfare. Others end with a whimper. And sometimes, that's enough. I spent my days fixing what was broken. Rebuilt the dock. One plank at a time. Put in new fencing. Repainted the cabin door. The exact same shade she'd picked 20 years ago. Something between sage and hope. The wind still blew strange at night, but it no longer whispered threats. Just memories. One evening, Clarence came by. Just showed up, hat in hand. Wanted to see it for myself, he said, eyeing the lake. Still here? I said. You did what no one else ever tried. You stood still. No. I moved, just in a direction they couldn't see. He nodded. I hope they never come back. They won't, not like that. He stayed for coffee. Then left the way he came. Quiet. Thoughtful. Winter crept in slowly. The lake froze at the edges, and the nights stretched long and black. I spent them reading old journals, carving wood, Feeding the fire. No more letters, no more threats. But I kept the box, not out of fear, out of respect, for the cost, for the reminder that peace isn't free, and silence is only safe when it's earned. Sometimes I look across the lake and think about how easily it all could have ended differently. How one signature, one missed notice, almost erased my life. Almost. But almost isn't the same as finished. I'm still here. And this land? It remembers me, not as a squatter, not as a name on a deed, but as the man who stayed when no one else would. And now, when the wind moves through the trees, it doesn't whisper warnings. It says, "Welcome home."